Thanks for joining. Welcome to Take the Fear Out of FAFSA. We're going to give it a couple more minutes before we go ahead and get started, but thanks for joining on time and for joining us for tonight's event. Again, if you're just joining, thanks again for joining us for the Take the Fear Out of FAFSA event, a nice Halloween-inspired scary factor for financial aid. So we're going to remove that scare factor tonight, hopefully. And thank you for joining. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Hi, everybody. I see you in the chat. Hi. Again, thanks for joining, everybody. Tonight is Take the Fear Out of FAFSA, and it's a nice financial aid introductory video and training and workshop and whatever you guys can get out of this. We're hoping that you will get a little bit of scare out of yourselves for financial aid. To introduce myself, my name is Christina LaFaso. I'm a senior admissions advisor in the Office of Undergraduate Admissions at Stony Brook University. We have a phenomenal guest here tonight from our Office of Financial Aid. I'm going to let her introduce herself. What will happen tonight is we'll have a bit of an information session with our guest. Myself and some of my colleagues will be answering some questions in the chat. If you have questions along the way, I can moderate them out to our guest speaker. And then hopefully we'll have time at the end for a Q&A portion as well. And we hope you enjoyed tonight's event. So without further ado, our special guest speaker, Ms. Erica Pollack.
Hi, everyone. So yes, my name is Erica Pollack, and I am the Assistant Director of Financial Aid at Stony Brook. And I have experience also at a private university. So I feel between the private school and the state school, I do have a lot of information I can share with you tonight to try and take the fear out of the FAFSA. I do hear from a lot of people that it's scary and they're nervous. And my goal tonight is to make it a simpler process for you and answer any questions you might have, and to really help you understand that it's not as scary as maybe your friends have made you think. So I'm going to share my screen to get the presentation started.
And before we get started, I'm going to send out a couple of poll questions to you guys to see who our audience is tonight. The first one is out to you now, of which best describes you, whether you're a high school student at whatever level, transfer student, a parent or guardian or family member, or a school counselor joining us tonight. So we have a lot of high school seniors, which we were expecting. Thanks for joining, everybody. A lot of parents, some school counselors. That's awesome. There's still about 30 people waiting to respond. So make sure to click the response of which best describes you on your screen. We'll give it just a few more seconds. Awesome. So we are 61% high school seniors, 27% parent, guardian, or family members. That's awesome. Thanks for joining. Okay, let's get a next poll. So this is which best describes your knowledge of financial aid. And you can choose whichever one feels most right to you. There's no harm in answering any which way. We're just trying to get a gauge of how much financial aid information you guys have already. Kind of split. So 45% of our audience right now says they know a little bit but need to learn more. 4% of you feel like you're confident with your knowledge. We love that. 23%, I don't know anything about financial aid, and that's totally fine. That's why you're here today. All right, so we're going to move on to one last question before we go ahead and get started, which is just nice and easy. Where are you guys located? New York? Outside of New York? Outside of the US? As expected, lots of New Yorkers here. All right, 92% of our audience is from New York. So great. Thank you guys for letting us know. We're going to go ahead and end that poll and we'll get started.
You guys can see my screen, right? Take the fear of the FAFSA?
Yes, we can.
Yes? Okay, thanks. So we're focusing this presentation, we are going to focus on the 21-22 school year. So that's for your high school seniors. That next year is considered the 21-22 academic year. So remember that when we're talking about this, if anybody here that's joining us tonight is a junior, you'd be the 22-23 year. And this is really important, and it does get very confusing when we talk about financial aid. So some of the topics we're going to discuss tonight is what is financial aid? What does it mean when we say cost of attendance or COA? What is the expected family contribution or EFC? What does it mean when we say financial need? What are the categories, types, and sources of financial aid? What is the free application for federal student aid or FAFSA? And how do schools handle special circumstances? So financial aid consists of all the funds, whether they're scholarships, whether they're grants, loans, or work study provided to students and families to help pay for college. So I can tell you that everybody's financial aid is not going to be the same. It really varies student to student. I'll have students call me and say, I don't see any of my financial aid, when I can see that they were offered some student loans. And I'll say to them, oh, I see that you were offered student loans. And they'll say, but that's not financial aid. But it is. And I'm going to get into later in the presentation, we will talk about why loans are considered a form of financial aid and that they're not a bad form of financial aid. But be aware that some students, that might be your source of financial aid. Every school has what they call a cost of attendance. And cost of attendance is not meaning what your bill is. Cost of attendance is really geared to helping you prepare and know exactly how much it's going to cost you to go to that school, because it's never just the bill. So it could be your tuition fees, but it also could be your room and board if you plan on living on campus. So living on campus, the room is your dorm room and the board is your meal plan. So your cost of attendance would include both of those. Your books and supplies, they're not considered billed costs. You're going to buy those on your own, but they are included in your cost of attendance to help you prepare and know how much money you're going to need to come. Transportation costs, and that could just be if you're not living on campus, but you're going to drive back and forth to campus, that could be your gas money. But also at Stony Brook University, we do have buses on campus. So sometimes your cost of attendance includes not a bill for the buses, but you are essentially helping to pay for the buses on campus to help you get around. And personal expenses like your shampoo and your Starbucks run. Those are all part of your cost of attendance, because we do want to give you a good picture of what it will cost you to attend the school. Understand that cost of attendance varies school to school, but it also varies whether you plan on living on campus, whether you plan on living at home with parent, or whether you plan on renting an apartment near campus. So when I say direct costs, I mean that's your bill. So that could be your tuition and fees and your room and board and maybe some lab costs. Your indirect costs are those shampoo and the gas money that I was talking about. When you fill out your FAFSA, FAFSA is going to create for you an EFC. And this number is really what drives your financial aid. This is the number that my office really uses to help decide how much financial aid you can receive. So this is the way the government created the EFC, or the original reason for the EFC is it's supposed to show the amount of the family can reasonably expect it to contribute to your college. But I can tell you that a lot of families say that's not reasonable for me, and that is very potentially true. But that's what we have to deal with. So this number does stay the same college by college. And this number was created when you fill out the FAFSA by parent contributions and student contributions. They are looked at a little differently. If you are the parent filling out a FAFSA for your student and you're putting in your income and you're putting in how much you have in your bank account and you're putting in whether you have any investments, do know that the government is not looking at all that money the same. They're not looking at it and saying, oh, this family has all this money and they can use this to help pay for college. In creating this EFC and in that parent contribution, it is a section of income protection, because they do understand that you have other expenses that you will be trying to meet at the same time of paying for college, whether it's mortgages and car payments and things like that. The student contribution has less of an income protection because it's kind of assumed that the students won't have that same level of responsibility that the parents do. So it's a whole formula used from the FAFSA to create this EFC, which then is used to create your financial aid, which I'll explain more in the next slide. So we do have to figure out whether students have financial need. And need is essentially if you take your cost of attendance and you minus your EFC, or expected family contribution. If it's a positive number, then you have financial need. And there are some pieces of financial aid that are need-based. So if you have financial need, you can be entitled to need-based awards. If you do not have need, if the number, when you take the cost of attendance and you minus the EFC, is a negative number, so you don't have financial need, then you have non-need-based awards. So this little graph is just supposed to show you how it could vary from school to school, and how, again, whether you're dorming or commuting, how it makes a difference. So, if you look at the pink chart, bar chart, the number 1, you can see that this is a pretty high cost of attendance, but the EFC stays the same. So the need would vary depending on the student's situation and whether they're choosing to maybe live on campus or whether a private school versus a state school. So I did say that there's different types of financial aid. So the number 1 piece that everybody wants, and I definitely recommend that you look for this as much as you can, are gift aid or scholarships. There's lots of different scholarship sites out there, and every school does offer scholarships as well. Some schools, when you apply to the school, they'll automatically look at your GPA and SAT scores and figure out what kind of scholarships they can offer you. And some schools do have separate applications that you need to fill out. So I definitely recommend to all students that they scour the school's websites to make sure they're not missing out on any scholarship applications that they could potentially apply for from the school itself. Then at the same time, the high schools have lots of scholarships that the students can be looking into. Just off the top of my head, I can tell you 2 websites that I often recommend to students. The first one is tuitionfundingsources.com, and the second one is fastweb.com. These are both 2 sites with lots of scholarships listed on there. And a lot of these scholarships do require students to write essays and fill out applications. And I can tell you that there's so much money out there, but a lot of students don't want to fill out those applications or write those essays. So there's a lot of money left on the table. So definitely take the time, look at this. Every little bit helps, even if it's just $50 to help buy a textbook, that can make a big difference in the grand scheme of your college education. Grants can come from school or it can come from the state. We're lucky here in New York State, we do have a lot of grants that are available to us. And the federal government also has some grants, which I will talk about soon. Then we talk about what is considered self-help versions of financial aid. Essentially, you're helping yourself by taking out this form of financial aid, and this could be loans, like which I will talk about a little bit more, and employment or a job on campus. So the major source of financial aid is from the federal government. The federal government sponsors the Pell Grant and it sponsors a lot of the student loans. So there's a lot of money spent right there. New York State, I mentioned, has a lot of grants and financial aid for us as well. The colleges and universities. Then there's a lot of private sources, a lot of organizations out there, maybe your church, and then employers. So parents, double check and see whether your employer offers anything for your students. So I did mention a little bit about the Pell Grant. Pell Grant is from the federal government. And when you fill out the FAFSA and you have your EFC, basically anybody who has an EFC under 5,000 could potentially be eligible for some Pell Grant money. The Pell Grant does range and it goes by your EFC and the number of credits you're registered for. So even if you're a part-time student, you could potentially get some Pell Grant money. So this year, the maximum award for Pell was $6,435 for the academic year. SEOG is a grant that goes along with Pell. To be able to get SEOG, you do have to be Pell eligible, but also you do need to do your FAFSA early. The FAFSA for 21-22 did come out October 1st, so just about 28 days ago. So it is considered still early if you haven't done your FAFSA yet. And again, if you're Pell eligible, definitely you want to try and get this SEOG grant as well. Each school is given limited funding and SEOG to give out. So most of them do give it out on a first come, first served basis. If any of you students are thinking about going into teaching, I do recommend that you look and see whether the schools you're looking at participate in the Teach Grant. The Teach Grant is, again, a grant, so free money. Whenever you hear the word grant, know that that's free money. You don't pay it back. But the Teach Grant is for students who are planning on going to teaching and willing to teach in a high need area. And you do sign an agreement to serve. So if you get this grant, you're committing yourself to teaching, or at least for the few years that you got the grant. So if you got the grant for 3 years of college, you need to teach for 3 years. If you do not, that money becomes a loan. So you do have to pay it back at that point. Stony Brook does not participate in the Teach Grant, and where I used to work, LIU, also does not participate in the Teach Grant. So I can't give you too much more information about that because I have not personally worked at a school that participated in the Teach Grant, because it is a lot of work for the universities to maintain that. But it definitely is something that I definitely recommend students to look into. Work study is a job on campus. The money that the students earn can be used to help pay their bill, but I can tell you most of the students use it for their own personal expenses. Remember that Starbucks comes first. The jobs on campus do work very well with the students, and they understand that for them, the school does come first. So if you have a job on campus, but then you have a test coming up, a lot of times the job will say to you, it's okay, don't come in today, study for your test, because that's more important. But it's also a really good way of developing some time management skills, because you do figure out this is the time I have to study and this is the time I have to work and this is when I have my classes. So I definitely recommend work study. When you fill out the FAFSA, there is a question that says, are you interested in work study? If you say yes, you're not committing yourself to having to work, but you are giving yourself the opportunity to be offered a work study. So definitely I recommend that you say yes to that question. but know that you don't have to work if you don't want to. If you realize that your classes are too tough or your schedule doesn't allow, you're not committing yourself to have to do it. But if when you answer the FAFSA question, if you say, no, I'm not interested, you will not be offered the opportunity. Now we're going to get into student loans. So the student loans are, again, from the federal government, the first ones I'm going to talk about. There's the subsidized loan and the unsubsidized loan. If you have need, remember that little diagram I'm talking about need, you could be offered a subsidized loan. What a subsidized loan is, it's a loan given to the students while they're in school that does not accrue any interest until the student graduates. So a typical freshman can have $3,500 per year in the subsidized loan. Now that's not a lot of money if you consider the cost of a lot of our colleges out there. $3,500 is not that much, but it's still it's really helpful. It doesn't accrue interest, and it helps the student establish credit. It helps the student be a little bit buy-in to their college experience. If the student has the $3,500 in the subsidized loan, they'll also be offered $2,000 in the unsubsidized loan. The unsubsidized loan does accrue interest while the student is in school, but the maximum a dependent, which we will talk about when I say dependent student, the maximum a dependent student can have in the unsubsidized loan is $2,000 per year. So again, that freshman is going to have $5,500 per year in student loans. The current interest rate on the loan is really low. It's the lowest I've seen in the 10 years that I've been doing financial aid, 2.75%. These loans do go up when the student has more credits. So a freshman can borrow $5,500 per year, a sophomore $6,500, juniors and seniors can borrow $7,500 in these student loans. If the financial aid between the Pell and the New York State awards and the loans is not enough to help cover your bill, then parents can have the option of taking out a Parent Plus loan. So this is not in the student's name, it's only in the parent's name. And again, this will be accruing interest while the student is in school, but no payments are required on it while the student is in school. You can defer all the payments. And the interest rate on this loan is 5.3% currently. So this is a nice option for students who need more money while they're in school and their parents are willing to take out this loan. If a parent applies for the parent loan, but they get denied because it is a credit-bearing loan, the student can then take out a little bit more unsubsidized loan in their name. So that's another thing to keep in mind. And you can have a co-signer on the loan if need be. If the student or the parent doesn't want to take out the parent loan, or the student doesn't have a parent to do that for them, then a lot of our students do take out private loans. And we do have, there's a lot of lenders out there who work with students, and a lot of times they'll give them interest breaks if they have good grades, or if you're willing to make interest only payments while you're in school, your interest rate could be lower that way. So we definitely have a lot of ways for students to look into these and to make sure they're picking out the right loan for them. Now we're going to talk about some programs that New York State offers, or for New York State residents. So the main one is TAP, or the Tuition Assistance Program. This is for students who are graduating from a New York State high school who are planning to go to a school in New York. It doesn't matter what school it is, as long as it's in New York State. So it could be a private school, it could be a state school, it could be a CUNY, it could be a community college. This is a great award for New York State residents going to school in New York. When I graduated high school in New York, I chose to go undergraduate college in Massachusetts. So I gave up my right to be eligible for TAP, and my mom has not let me forget that, because it is a lot of money and it is a nice way to help cover your cost of school. This year, the maximum TAP award was $5,165. If you're not a full-time student, you cannot have TAP, but you could potentially have aid for part-time study. So this is a part-time version of TAP. Then New York State has some scholarships for students that the high schools can nominate students for. One is the New York State Scholarship for Academic Excellence. One is the Math and Science Teaching Incentive Program. If you are a veteran, there are Veterans Awards from New York State. And then we also have the Excelsior Scholarship. Excelsior is for SUNY and CUNY schools only, not private schools, but there is a private school version of the Excelsior called the Enhanced Tuition Award. Excelsior was designed as one of the free college programs, but I want to make sure people are aware that it doesn't really mean that our school is free if you're eligible for Excelsior. What Excelsior does is it covers your tuition only, not your fees, not your room and board. And the tuition is brought back to the 2016-17 rate. So right now, that's about $3,200 a semester. So if your scholarships or your Pell or your TAP equal more than $3,200 a semester, then you could be eligible for Excelsior from New York State based on your family's income, but we at Stony Brook won't be able to award you the Excelsior because it doesn't fit into your award page. So it's a very complicated program, and students do get very upset about different things regarding Excelsior. So I just want to make sure that when people hear free college, they understand that it's not as simple as it might have been advertised, but it is definitely a great award for those who are eligible for it. And I can definitely recommend that you check out the New York State website, hesc.ny.gov, for more information about any of these programs. What's also great is this year, New York State has offered some programs for non-US citizens, which is great because a lot of times we have non-citizens who want to be able to take advantage of getting financial aid, and we really don't have a lot we can offer them. But New York State this year did create the DREAM Act, and there's a separate application on the HESC website for students who might not be eligible for any of these awards based on their citizenship, but they can apply as a dreamer.
We have a couple questions in regards to TAP. So one question was, does everyone get TAP? And similarly, TAP is only for financial need, right?
So TAP is not given to everybody. What happens is TAP looks at your income to decide whether you're eligible. And my general rule of thumb to know whether you potentially could be eligible for TAP, but I would tell you to apply anyway, even if your income is not what I'm going to say it is. My general rule of thumb is if your New York State taxable income, which is different from your federal, so just your New York State taxable income for the family is under 80,000, then you potentially could be eligible for TAP. Again, even if you're thinking, oh, I think I make more than that, or I'm not eligible, I do recommend that everybody apply. The worst can happen is you don't receive the award, but it's better to apply and have New York State let you know, sorry. And somebody said, is it need-based? It's kind of different in that regard because it does, your income is looked at and determined from New York State whether you're eligible, and the amount does range. So I have some students who only get $200 a semester in TAP, and I have some who get the $2,500 or so per semester in TAP. So it does range. The all the awards, the New York State Scholarship and the Math one, those don't have income requirements. The Excelsior right now, the cap, the New York State taxable income cap for Excelsior is $125,000.
One last question in regards to TAP and one about Excelsior. So how many colleges are you allowed to put on your TAP versus your FAFSA? And the other question for Excelsior would be for undocumented or students without social security numbers. Are they eligible for Excelsior, or is there some sort of award for them?
So for the non-documented students, they should apply as the Dreamers, and they could potentially get Excelsior as a Dreamer. The Excelsior program is similar to that Teach Grant program that I was telling you about, in the sense that if you don't follow the contract, it becomes a loan. The Excelsior scholarship requires students to stay in New York for the amount of semesters that they receive the award after they graduate. So if I get the Excelsior scholarship for 2 years while I'm in school, I'm required to stay in New York State for 2 years after I graduate. Otherwise, I have to pay that money back. The question regarding how many schools on tap, when you fill out your FAFSA, you're allowed to put 10 colleges at a time on your FAFSA application. When you go to then fill out your TAP application, if you do it directly from your FAFSA, which I recommend that you do, only one school in New York will show up on your TAP application. You can only put one at a time, but you can always change it. So if it's only October right now and I think I want to go to Binghamton, I'm going to put Binghamton on my TAP application, but then let's say come January, I realize that I don't want to go to Binghamton. It's too cold up there. I want to stay local. I'm going to go to Adelphi. I can change my TAP application to say that I'm going to go to Adelphi. So we will talk about the FAFSA and about the colleges that you can list on there, but you can put 10 at a time on your FAFSA. You can always change them, but TAP is only one at a time. Any other questions before we go on?
Nope, you can go ahead.
Okay, so when you, I mentioned FAFSA, I probably said the word at least 20 times in this presentation. So it's the free application for federal student aid. So you're going to go to FAFSA.gov, and most of us are going to start a new FAFSA. If you did a FAFSA already and you want to make corrections, then you're going to be the returning user and log in that way. So you are going to fill out the FAFSA to get your EFC. All colleges require the FAFSA to receive financial aid. If you don't believe you're financial aid eligible, but you believe that you might be able to get a scholarship, some schools won't require the FAFSA to get scholarships, and some schools will. So I definitely recommend that everybody fill out the FAFSA, whether you think you're eligible for some of the awards we spoke about tonight or not. The FAFSA did come out October 1st, as I mentioned. And for the 21-22 FAFSA, you are using 2019 tax information. Some schools do have a set deadline that they use to fill out the FAFSA. Stony Brook does not. We will take your FAFSA anytime. If you go onto the FAFSA website right now, you will see the 21-22 year, but you also will see the 2021 year. Because I do have students who are Stony Brook right now who maybe forgot to do their FAFSA, because FAFSA has to be done every year that you're in school. Once a year, you have to do it. So just remember, every October 1st to fill out that FAFSA, but make sure you're filling out the right year. That is something that I see a lot of students do, because it does get confusing. So if you're going to school next year, it's the 21-22. If you're in college right now, it's the 2021. The FAFSA is done electronically, and I definitely recommend that you do it electronically, but a lot of people are not comfortable with that. So you could fill it out on paper if you do prefer that, but understand that it will take much longer for it to be processed that way. So I did say you're going to use your 2019 tax information. And one of the things that you need to be aware of is you need to have your, so I do recommend that you have your taxes next to you when you're filling that out, so that you have all your income information, but you might also need to have your bank statements to know how much money you have in the bank. You do not need to put any retirement accounts, and you do not need the value of your primary residence. The FAFSA does ask you about your investments. So they don't mean your current home, but if you own a second home, they do want you to figure out what your investment net worth on that second home is. So I always say to people, pretend you're going to sell that house tomorrow. How much would you sell it for? And how much would you profit from that sale of the house? If I'm going to sell my house for $500,000, but I owe $400,000 on it, my investment net worth would be $100,000 on that for my investment there. FAFSA also asks you about untaxed income. So if I receive child support for my children, I'm going to have to put that under untaxed income. If I have, if I was given money from somebody, I would have to put that as untaxed income. I'm just going to go back to that slide one more time. And the FAFSA will have a section about the student and a section about the parent. So make sure you keep track of which section you're in and that you're putting the right person's income under the right section. I have seen many FAFSAs where the parent's income gets duplicated, both on the student side and on the parent side. When you're in the
Sorry, before you move on, we're getting a lot of questions about do parents and students need to create one? And if you're a parent of multiple children going to college, do they need to create multiple accounts, or can they link each student in their household to them? So just clarify on that.
I'm going to go to this slide then. So when you're going into FAFSA, you're going to need an FSA ID to sign a FAFSA. A student needs one and a parent needs one. If I'm the parent of multiple students, I only need one. I don't need to have a different one for each student. And if I'm married, I don't necessarily, me and my spouse don't necessarily each need one if I'm willing to be the primary FSA ID user for all my kids. But each student needs their own and each parent needs their own. So if you don't have an FSA ID yet, and if you did FAFSA years ago, you might remember that FAFSA used to use PINs. We don't have PINs anymore. We have these FSA IDs or usernames and passwords. So you go to fsaid.ed.gov to create your username and password. Whatever you create, make sure you save it somewhere safe, because you will need this a lot. Students need these FSA IDs to access their loan information and to access their many different things while they're in school. So it is really important that they keep it, remember it. And when you're creating your FSA ID, you do need a different email address for the parent and the student. Each one needs their own. And don't use a email address that you might not have access to in a few months. So I don't recommend students use their high school email addresses, because what if the high school stops letting them have access to that email address when they graduate? So you can always create a free email address on Hotmail or Gmail to keep it separate so that you always have access to it. If you create one and you don't remember, there is very easy ways to retrieve them on here, but it is that is a necessary step. A FAFSA is not considered signed unless the parent and the student both are FSA IDs are on there. Any questions before we move on from that?
No, you can go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to this slide. When you're in the FAFSA and you get to the section where it's going to ask you about your income, parents do have the option to do what's called the IRS data retrieval tool. This is a really neat feature where you can link your tax information onto FAFSA. So you do not have to type in each of the numbers. You could just it's basically you're giving FAFSA access to your IRS data, and it'll pull the information from your tax return onto FAFSA. You will not see the numbers because they will be encrypted for your security, but understand that the colleges can see the numbers. And so I do recommend this feature. I think it's really neat, but understand that not everybody can do the data retrieval. If you filed an amended tax return, you cannot do the data retrieval. If you do not have a social security number, this won't work for you. And if you're married, but you filed separately, you cannot do the data retrieval because there's no way to retrieve both parents' income onto the FAFSA. I had something else I was going to say about that. Oh, so one of the things that happens with financial aid is we in the financial aid office have to do what's called verification. One of the 3 FAFSAs gets selected for this. So if you get selected for verification, that means we at the school are going to ask you for information like a household form where you're going to fill out for us, letting us know who lives in the house and how many people in the house are going to college. We might ask you for copies of your tax return. We might ask you for your W-2s. So this data retrieval should prevent you from being selected and having to submit all those documents to us. So that's one of the reasons why we recommend that families do the data retrieval. So I did mention how for the 21-22 school year, we are going to be using the 2019 information. Obviously, we know a lot of people have been affected by COVID, and a lot of people have different life circumstances happening where your 2021-22 income might not be the same as it was in 2019. We still recommend that you fill out the FAFSA using that 2019 information, but then you want to contact the schools once you know which schools your students are really interested in, and you're going to ask to do what's called a reevaluation. A lot of the schools do have websites where you can upload these documents. So basically, you're going to let us know why your income is not the same as what's reflected on the FAFSA, and we can make a change for you to see if we can get you more financial aid based on a change in unemployment status. Maybe you have unusual medical expenses not covered by insurance. Maybe the parents are no longer married, and that can make a difference on the FAFSA. So definitely, if you know that your FAFSA information does not reflect your true family picture, contact the schools that your student is interested in. When I was talking about the EFC before, understand that EFC also goes by how many people are in the household and how many people from that household are going to college. So if you have 2 or 3 kids going to college, your EFC will be lower because FAFSA takes into account these students who are going to school. And I did have something else I wanted to say about that. Christina, do we have any questions before I move on?
I'm sorry. There's so many questions in the chat. Yes, but we'll get to it. Oh, we're at the question section. So one of the questions that's been repeated a couple times is it mandatory for both parents to give their tax returns?
If you are married, yes. If the parents are married and they did not file a joint return, then yes, you do need both returns or both information added to the FAFSA. So if you filed separately, you do need to look at your 2 AGIs, add them together and put them on the FAFSA. And then if you are divorced, it's the custodial parent that goes on the FAFSA, not both parents. If your student is looking at some selective colleges, like let's say Boston University or Cornell University, do understand that those schools do require a different form in addition to the FAFSA. The CSS profile is used by the selective schools, and they ask for a lot more information than the FAFSA. So for divorced parents, do know that your information will be asked on the CSS profile, even though it's not asked on the FAFSA.
Another question would be for parents with green cards who just moved to New York this year, would they be considered for in-state tuition, and how would they declare income if they don't have a tax history yet?
They might have to use their foreign tax return on the FAFSA, and if they don't have a social security number, they could use their tax ID number. If a parent doesn't have a social security number and they're filling out the student's FAFSA, they can put zeros as the social security number, but the student can't do the same. If the student does not have a social security number, then they are not eligible to fill out a FAFSA. But they can fill out the TAP application as a dreamer.
Great. And we have one student whose parents in 2019 filed jointly. However, due to the pandemic, one of the parents has sadly passed. So how would they use that income now that there's a great discrepancy between 2019 and now? And this can go for anything of that sort.
Yeah, that I do recommend that the student contact the schools that he or she is applying to and see how they want to handle that. I would tell the student to separate out the income. So if they know from looking at the tax return the which parent earned what, I would say they could put the parent who's still with us, their information on the FAFSA. But if they don't feel comfortable doing that, then they can contact the school.
Okay. And we have a student asking, and I think that more on the financial aid aspect. What's better to choose, in-state college or out-of-state college? So, in your perspective and opinion, how would you answer that?
That's a hard question
Tricky one.
because it really depends on so many things. Obviously, what do you want to get out of your college experience, and whether you want to be close to home, whether you want to be um, far away. Who do you want to meet? What does the school offer? All those things are really important. Um, I personally would tell students to definitely look at both. I think, like one of the things that my mom did to me, which I didn't like at the time, but I understand it and it made a lot of sense, is she put a distance restriction on when I was looking at schools. She said it had to be 3 hours away, no more than 3 hours away. And my school was exactly 3 hours door to door. And I think that really, was important because it helped me know that she could come up in one day if I needed her to, as opposed to having to get on the airplane or having to book a train ticket. So I think that's something that really came in handy for me personally. But going to an out of state school and having to pay out of state tuition, that was pretty challenging. And I did have a lot of student loans that it took me a while to pay off. But I do feel like I got a lot of great experiences from my personal college like, experience being out of state. I did like meeting people from all different places, but it's not to say that you wouldn't have the same experience local. I have a coworker whose daughter goes to New Paltz, and she was telling us that she met a friend from Rochester, and they were like, they live on completely other ends of the state. So it's for them to see each other is just as hard as me seeing my friends who are in Massachusetts. So it really, you never know who you're going to meet, you never know what kind of experiences you're going to have. I also think visiting the schools is really important. I know that's hard right now with the pandemic. I know college tours are a little different, but I do really believe in that gut feeling that you get when you walk into a college campus, whether you feel that that place is for you or not.
And a couple of students asked on the FAFSA application, where you can list as many schools as you want in there, it does tell them that ranking may be taken into effect. So how do you suggest that they rank their schools?
Well, that you can't put as many as you want. You can only put 10. And the 10 that you put, you definitely should put your top choices and the ones that you think you're most likely to go to. And you can always change them. But do know that if you put, let's say you put Stony Brook now, and then in December you take out Stony Brook and you add Oneonta in its place. Oneonta will only see that you started the FAFSA in December when you added that school. We used to, maybe 5 years ago, I could tell you I used to be able to see all the schools listed on the FAFSA that a student put. Now they changed that. I can only see my school on there. And that was done purposely to avoid students feeling that they had to put priority on their FAFSA, because some schools did look at that and say, where did the student put us on their FAFSA rank? And it did affect them. But now you can't do that anymore. We at the college can only see our school listed. We can't see all the other schools that you put on there. So that shouldn't be such an issue. If you're only applying to New York State schools, that first school that you put on your FAFSA, that will be the one that comes up on your TAP application, but know that you can always change that.
Okay. And is it best to apply to the colleges first or fill out the FAFSA first?
I would definitely tell you to fill out the FAFSA if you have a good idea of what schools you plan on applying to. The timeline for this year is a little not just because of the pandemic, but in general, financial aid timeline is a little strange because we're telling you to fill out the FAFSA in October, but maybe you didn't even fill out your college applications yet. I know like Thanksgiving time is a big time to do that. And Christmas time is maybe when we'll start hearing from the colleges of where you got in, but you might not hear from us with your financial aid awards until March or April. So it is a long time that you are waiting to hear from things, and we are telling you to fill out the FAFSA pretty soon. So it is, I know, not the easiest situation, because I've had students who say to me, oh yeah, I'm just going to put 10 random schools on there, and then they don't even wind up applying to those schools in the first place. So trying to figure out where at least you're going to apply, whether you've done it or not, is okay, but try and be mindful of making that list as soon as you can, so that you are putting the right schools on the FAFSA and then filling out those applications.
Sure. And one more about the FSA ID. That seems to be a little point of confusion for a lot of people. So, although both parents' income are necessary, did you mention that both parents do not need their own FSA ID? In other words, you can just both work off of the one FSA ID if they file jointly?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, perfect.
If both parents want to have an FSA ID, they can, but it's not required. And if a parent plans on applying for the Parent Plus loan, they do need an FSA ID. So I do have some students where even if their parents are divorced, the non-custodial parent does take out that Parent Plus loan. So they will need their own FSA ID to apply for the Plus loan. And then I also have some students who it alternates. One year it's mom taking out the Plus loan, one year it's dad taking out the Plus loan. So then they each do need their own FSA ID.
And can you repeat one more time the financial aspect that they're looking into? So no retirement, IRA, looking into savings, checkings, what else?
So they're going to ask you for your income. They're going to ask you for your taxes, like how much taxes did you pay? If you have money in the bank, what is the interest on there? What is the money in the bank? If you have mutual funds, if you have money market accounts, UGMAs, 529s. With the 529s, it's important to know who is the custodial account. So if the 529 is in the parent's name, even if the student is the beneficiary of it, then it goes under the parent portion of the FAFSA. And you can, you don't have to put, if you have a 529 for multiple kids in your household, you only have to put for the one that's going to college at this time. If you, maybe you have housing provided for you from your clergy, you do have to put that on there. If you own a business of more and you have more than 100 employees, you have to put the value of the business. I said cash, savings, checking.
Okay. And what year should you start applying for financial aid?
The fall of your senior year in high school. So you can only do financial aid for when you're going to be starting college at that time, but you are going to do the FAFSA for every year that you are in college.
And will the circumstances for financial aid change for 22 to 23 academic year?
No, it should not.
Let's see. Do you need to report deferred comp money on FAFSA?
That is a good question. I'm going to say no, but when you're filling out the FAFSA, there is like a help button next on the right hand side, and it'll help you see if the box, when you're filling out, each box has a help side, and you can see whether there's any information there about what you're filling out at the time.
Okay. And I know there's a lot of questions in the chat. I apologize to everyone. We do have a lot of participants here today, and we just are running out of time. I have two last questions for our phenomenal guests. For any sort of SBU scholarships, do you have to apply for financial aid even though you know you're not going to get anything?
No, Stony Brook does not require you to fill out the FAFSA to get scholarships.
And then if you're filling out the FAFSA for a student, why does a parent have to make an FSA ID?
Because the FSA ID is used to sign the FAFSA. So a student's FAFSA is not considered valid without the parent's signature on it. I did say when I started this presentation that I would talk about this, and I think I missed it. Students are considered dependent on the FAFSA up until the age of 24 years old. So even if the student is living on their own and making their own income, if they are an undergraduate student and they're not married and they're not in foster, they were never in foster care and they were not adopted, and they're not having a risk of homeless, they are considered dependent and they need their parents' information on the FAFSA up until age 24. If you're a graduate student, or if you're over 24, or if you were in foster care, or if you're considered homeless, you do not need your parents' information.
All right, we'll go right up to 8 o'clock. What's the earliest you can get a financial aid package if they were to do their FAFSA today?
Well, every school is different in that. Some schools will give you your financial aid packages earlier than others. I can tell you Stony Brook and other state schools, we're more on the later end. It will be March or April for us. But some schools are working on them now for next year. And some students, you will be able to find out your scholarships before you find out the rest of your financial aid. Some schools will let you know about, again, if you know, based on your GPA score, they might say everybody with this GPA gets this scholarship. So you might be able to find out, you know, ahead of time about that, and then you'll have to wait for the rest of your financial aid package. And I know a lot of the schools are going testing optional for next year, but I think a lot of them are still going to use SAT scores to figure out scholarships.
Okay. And we have some transfer students here. They're wondering about some sort of informational meeting regarding transferring from another college to Stony Brook. That might be something we may add in the future if we see a need. You can absolutely always reach out to financial aid for assistance, and we have information on our website, and it will be emailed to you if you're a transfer applicant applying to Stony Brook. So I just wanted to put that out there. We have time for like one more question, so let me find a good one. Is it better to decide the college I'm going to go to based on financial aid and scholarship? So what do you suggest?
If you ask me personally, I would say kind of a yes to that, because in today's society, I do believe most careers are going to require students to go to grad school. So I think if you can get your undergraduate degree covered for minimal cost, based, you know, if you're eligible for a lot of financial aid and scholarships, a lot of times your undergrad is you're able to get a lot covered, but graduate school, you still have to, you know, mainly pay or get loans. So I do think a lot of students should look at that and say, you know what, I'm going to go undergrad low cost and I'll spend some money on my grad school.
Great. Thank you so much. I apologize to those students and parents and all of our guests who submitted questions that we just weren't able to get to. I did put in the chat different ways of getting in touch with myself, not myself, but our office, the Office of Admissions, as well as the Financial Aid Office for whatever your questions may be, and put the links to our websites in there as well to learn more. Thanks for joining one more time. Thank you so much, Erica. You've been awesome in sharing this wealth of wisdom and answering all these questions. So thank you. And we hope you have a wonderful night. Thanks for joining. And we hope we took a little bit of fear out of that FAFSA for you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.